Hi, I'm Sofia Fonseca, and this is the ONLA podcast, a podcast on African archaeology and heritage. In our first episodes, we'll be interviewing the teachers for our online course on African archaeology and heritage that will be held at the Coursera platform at the beginning of 2021. We count on you to join the course. For now, listen to the teachers and enjoy.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have with us Alexa Höhn from the Goethe University in Frankfurt. Alexa is an archaeobotanist specialized in the study of charcoal from archaeological sites, using it to understand the ancient landscape, nutrition, and even the type of wood used on the buildings at a specific site. Her geographical specialization is on West and Central Africa, and her fieldwork have been developed in countries such as Burkina Faso, Benin, Cameroon, and Nigeria. Alexa is one of our teachers in the MOOC on African Archaeology and Heritage, and will be giving an introduction to archaeobotany. She will also present her project on cultivated landscapes in Africa. Dear Alexa, welcome to the podcast. We met 2 years ago in Aswan when we presented our project for the first time to the TANA network, and I'm so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Sophia, for having me. And yes, that was when this exciting journey started, actually. I remember vividly.
It was a beautiful setting. Aswan is always a pleasure to be.
It was wonderful. Yeah, definitely.
So, Alexa, can you tell us a little bit about your journey from a botanist to archaeobotanist? How did that happen to you?
Yes, actually, it was quite a long journey, and it was not that I decided to become an archaeobotanist when I started to study biology, but it went around some corners, actually. So when I started to study biology, I thought that I would become a behavioral biologist, maybe trying to understand dolphins, things like that. But then I met a professor. She was called Friederike König in my first seminar, in my first workshop. And she was a very enthusiastic botanist. And so we worked on the microscope looking at plant cells. And she was always so lively and saying, "Isn't it great what you see there?" That I said, "Oh, this is really interesting. So maybe I should specialize in botany." And that was what I did. And I always loved working on the microscope. So then there was offered a course by another woman, Angela Kreutz. She's an archaeobotanist in Hesse, in the state where I live in. And she offered a course on wood anatomy. And so I said, "Oh, microscoping, working on the microscope, that's interesting. I have to take that course." And that was when I discovered the beauty of wood, actually. And I decided for myself that I really would love to do something with wood anatomy on my diploma thesis. And I took some other courses by a pioneer on wood anatomy, Fritz Hans Schweingruber. He's a Swiss guy, but he came for a workshop to Frankfurt. So it was always around wood. And then I started to work as a student researcher, or student helper actually at first, in the working group where I'm now, led by Professor Katharina Neumann. And being in her working group first as a student really was fascinating. And I really got interested also in African archaeobotany, African archaeology. So that was the first time that I really crossed the boundary from biology, wood anatomy, to the archaeobotanical view on wood anatomy, or using wood anatomy to answer archaeobotanical questions, rather. So that kind of was the way I took, and I worked there first as a student helper. Then I made my diploma thesis in her work group, but still on a very botanical topic. So how to separate different wood types within a family. And then she asked me if I wanted to do my PhD, and that was the first time that I really worked on an archaeobotanical question.
And when did Africa enter your way?
Yeah, well, Africa, it entered my way when I started working in Katharina Neumann's work group. And I was often there together with the other young archaeologists and other young archaeobotanists. And so the diploma thesis already was on a plant group or a tree group in Africa. We don't have these trees here in Europe, but really working in Africa started with a PhD. That was the first time that I went to Africa, and I was working on charcoals from excavations
in Burkina Faso.
In Burkina Faso.
The first country was Burkina then. Interesting.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
long.
Not
so long for sure. And how many projects that did you have? I see that you were working in different countries, from Burkina, Benin, Cameroon, Nigeria. So how did that went? You worked in different projects. Was a global networking project? How did it work, Alexa?
When I started with my PhD, I worked in a very large research project together with archaeologists, geographers, ethnologists, ethnographers, biologists, so botanists who were doing research on actual vegetation. And that was really wonderful because we were a lot of young PhD students, and we went together to the field and we were discussing, what we were doing and also our results. We could, relate to the results of the other PhD students. So that was really wonderful. I really enjoyed that a lot. And that was focusing on Burkina Faso. So I went there 2 times. And I also went to Benin because there was also a little bit of archaeology going on in Benin, but I didn't incorporate that into my thesis. But I did some field work there, and there are still charcoal samples up in our attic at the university, and I hope I can analyze them soon. It's planned. Yeah, so that was that. And after my PhD was finished, we had a new research program in Frankfurt, a bit smaller, with archaeologists mainly, and that took place in Nigeria and in Cameroon. And I focused the fieldwork on Cameroon, so that was the first time that I went to Cameroon, and that was a challenge because the analysis of the charcoal was much harder than in a savanna environment, because you have just a higher diversity of trees, so it's much harder. Many more possibilities you have to take into consideration when you identify the charcoals. But the environment, the nature was great. I like Cameroon. It was really wonderful to be there. And after, I think I was there for 3 times in Cameroon. And then after that project was finished, I had a small project also on Cameroon, but it was without field work. And then Katharina Neumann and Peter Bräunig, the archaeologist in Frankfurt, they had another project for 12 years on the Nok culture in Nigeria.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. That's an outstanding culture,
yeah. It was really, and it was, but it took me a long time to go for fieldwork because twice I tried, but then something happened, so I couldn't go. So I only went there 2016 to Nigeria, which was also a wonderful experience. First time in an Anglophone, English-speaking country in Africa. It was very nice because there was already a research station where we could stay, and all the cooperation with the local people had been established over years. So it was really wonderful to come there and to really start research right away. And the people there were so nice, so eager to help and to find out what I was looking for. I was researching also into current vegetation. I wanted to have a look at some trees and the uses they have and everything. So it was really cool to go out with the local guides and just hear what they think about the vegetation, and had a great time.
And Alexa, explain us a little bit how it works. So how does an archaeobotanist work? What are you looking for? And some of the answers that you can find.
Yeah, well, archaeobotany is a vast field. So there are all different types of botanical remains. And what people mostly can relate to probably is that we look at fruits and seeds. So the remains from edible plants. That's the one part. And the other part, which I'm specialized on, is to look at wood. Both of these types of remains mostly preserve chard in West Africa. So they need to have been in a fire and not burned totally, and then they preserve for thousands of years. And during an excavation, you can sample for these remains. Well, and then you take them to a lab and you compare it to a reference collection. So you need either for foods and seeds, you need a reference collection of foods and seeds. So a lot of work was always for the archaeobotanists when they went into the field to sample plants, grasses, herbs, trees, to sample the fruits, to sample a part of a twig and leaves, to identify the plant properly. The leaf and the twig, they go into a herbarium, and the tree, the seeds and the fruits, they have to be dried as well, and then they go into the reference collection. So, and then you have something and you think, it could look like this, and you go to the reference collection and check if it's really the same thing or if maybe something is different, and you have to try again. And for wood charcoal, it's actually the same principle. So you have a piece of wood, you make thin sections, or you char it, and then you compare that piece where you know where it comes from, where you have identified the tree yourself or with a specialist, and then you compare it to what you have in your archaeological assemblage.
That's really interesting. It's amazing how you can find all these connections, no, from
Yes.
what people used to eat and
Yeah.
how do they use the landscape.
Exactly.
Could you explain a little bit about your project on cultivating landscapes in Africa? That is also the case study you will present in our MOOC to the students that will be doing our online course on African archaeology and heritage.
Yeah, I can do so. And that actually relates to both, to the method I introduced, and to both remains, to both type of remains. I look at charcoal samples from all over West Africa, and most of these samples represent former fuels, former fires, hearths, for instance. And usually what you find there is what people take as fuel wood when they go out into the fields, or when they go out into to to the area where they walk out anyway. And so what we get is like each fire or fuel wood collection is a sample of the vegetation they visit daily. So from analyzing the remains, we get an idea of what that vegetation looked like. And then from the fruits and seeds, we have an idea of what they cultivated, what they collected. If you have an archaeozoologist, you also know, did they have cattle or goats, or did they only hunt wild animals? So you have an idea of how they used the landscape. And then with the charcoal, you can have a look at how the vegetation, the woody vegetation, responded to this type of land use. And you can see, for instance, if the land use becomes more intensified, that the woody vegetation also changes. So that's mainly what we do, and we try to find out which kind of land uses lead to what kind of vegetation, how the environment, the natural environment, like, is there a lake nearby, or is it more in a more rainy area, how this changes the vegetation.
That's very interesting. And so, can you, from your studies and these results, do some kind of relation with actual climate, actual landscape uses from actual societies? Can we do this kind of relation? Do you do this kind of comparison in your studies?
Yes, sure. I have to use ethnographic studies, for instance, as an analog to what I find, and to get ideas of how to interpret it. And talking about climate, it's rather the other way around, that from the results we can better get a more detailed picture of how people influenced the vegetation in the past for climate modeling. Instead of modelers just calculating based on population dynamics or anything, how the vegetation would have looked like in the past, we can get a better picture of what it actually looked like, at least locally, and then can have a model which is based on data and not just on calculations for the past. We can compare the models they calculate with the data we have, and then have a better base for calculations for climate modeling into the future.
And which countries are you including in this study, the cultivated landscapes?
In this study, I include material from Nigeria, from the Chad Basin. I include material from Benin, which I just talked about. A little bit of material also from Burkina Faso, from another area, not where I worked for the PhD, but from a little bit more to the south, which also makes a difference in the environment. I include material from Senegal, where I haven't worked before, where I'm really it will be interesting to look at that material. That is on my agenda for the next month. I will start to research the charcoal from Senegal and analyze them. I have material from Mali, and I think that's about it for the moment. But I hope that I can analyze more material from Senegal in the future, and I hope maybe to go to work on material from Sudan, which will be a very new environment for me, the other side of the continent.
Yeah, very interesting and very different places, no, and very different environments and contexts. So it will be
Mhm.
very interesting for sure to see the models that coming out from your research
Yeah.
in the next years.
The good thing is that in West Africa, you have bands of similar climate and bands of similar vegetation. So it will be interesting to compare Sudan, which is also has Sahelian vegetation, which has Sudanian vegetation, to compare that with the results we have from West Africa and to see what is the same and what is different.
Yeah, it will be amazing,
Yeah.
interesting. And regarding our MOOC, what are your expectations? What would you like to see in the future?
I really like the idea of having an open access platform on archaeology in Africa because it will be easy to access since it's on the internet. You don't need to buy any books, you don't need to rely on a library, you don't need to rely on access to scientific papers, which may be difficult for African students, especially. And so I really like and hope that it makes accessible knowledge about the research that is taking place on the African continent for African students and African researchers, and that it also raises an interest in this topic. That students will have the opportunity, whether in Europe or in Africa, to learn about what is going on, what is the state of the art, what do we know already in the different regions through the different case studies, and what are the different methods, what maybe is interesting, to the one student to the other student. So everybody might find something which he or she can relate to and say, like, wow, that's a cool method, that's a cool research question. I want to work in this. And actually, I hope that more students say, yeah, archaeobotany is interesting. It can tell us about the way the economy worked in the past, how people lived. And so it would be nice to have students interested in that. And I hope that in the long run, it will be possible to offer workshops, to really then work on material, not just see it in the internet, but hands-on, learn about archaeobotany and think about what they could do. And then, from that on, have African archaeobotanists, working in Africa and teaching in African universities. That's my dream.
For sure, I love your vision and your ideas, and yes, that would be amazing. And for yourself, new projects in the future. What do you have in mind? What other questions you have?
Yeah, actually, I hope to really to expand what I'm doing now into other regions, like in Sudan, what I already told about. And so I will write another grant proposal, which I hope will be successful. And I also hope that might have some funding for PhD students, for students in general, also here to raise the interest into that matter. And so I hope that these projects, which are just in the stage of being submitted, that they will be funded and we can go on doing that. And also the other thing I hope is that in Frankfurt we can have more archaeobotany also in the future and really implement kind of workshops that I was talking about. That would be really nice.
Yeah, that would be very, very important
Mm-hmm.
because and on the material, it's very important. Now you always said that You need the microscope, the special one. You need your collections, and then expertise, and that's experience.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what you need to have.
Yes, exactly. And the reference collection in Africa, it's not difficult to establish one. So for African universities to cooperate with botanists and collect these samples, that's no problem. And the microscopes for fruits and seed, you need a simple microscope, which is also not that expensive. For charcoal, the one, it's a bit more expensive, but still there are resources maybe which can be tapped. And so the only thing which then needs to develop is the expertise, and that is what I really would like to help to grow.
Yes, of course, of course. That's always in our mind, no? This connection between colleagues of different countries, and to bring that expertise to the field.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alexa, for this interview.
Yes, thank you, Sophia. It was nice to talk with you.
And see you soon. Thank you.
Yes, see you soon, and all the best for the growth of the UNLA and the MOOCs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you for joining the conversation with Alexa Höhn from the Goethe University in Frankfurt. Alexa is one of the teachers in our MOOC on African Archaeology and Heritage, and her work on archaeobotanic of the West Africa savannas will bring new information about landscape evolution and its resilience in the face of human use. Alexa was also one of the first supporters of the project and immediately put herself in front of the camera in Aswan back in 2018 and delighted us with her professionalism and knowledge. Thank you so much, Alexa, for your support. I'm sure her classes will become one of the favorites inside the course. Her wish to have archaeobotanical workshops in Frankfurt is indeed a beautiful project in itself, and I have no doubt that her passion for her work will inspire new archaeobotanists to specialize in African archaeology. On the next few weeks, we will keep on having conversations with our teachers around the course and their personal projects. So subscribe to the podcast and to our newsletter, and let's be friends on Facebook and Instagram. Take care and keep safe. I will talk to you soon.